Hello, my name is Annalie Carruthers, and I am the organizer of the Toyin Falola interviews. Welcome. In this series, Dr. Falola, globally renowned scholar and professor, will interview scholars and policymakers whose work and research are particularly relevant for the African continent and its peoples, including the diaspora. Dr. Falola will also discuss the scholars' most recent books with them. The ultimate goal in this series is to promote the work of great minds and to spread knowledge to the general public about current intellectual projects that these great minds are pursuing. Research themes can include, but are not limited to, the following: African affairs, African migration, religion, culture, intellectual history, development issues, theories, women's rights, disability rights, post-colonial society in Africa and other parts of the global South, and globalization. These discussions will be recorded over Zoom, and these recordings will be distributed on the Toyin Falola Network Facebook page, Twitter, and website. Thank you very much for joining us, and we hope that you enjoy.
Let's now ask Jonathan to ask questions, reflect on the answers that have been given, and if possible, we'll talk about some future directions so that this dialogue can generate, can become transformational in terms of how we move from here. Jonathan is very well known, Jonathan Haynes, for his book, Nollywood, The Creation of Nigerian Film Genres. I actually teach this book because I teach a class. I've been teaching a class on Nollywood for over 15 years now. So my students know him very well. And I also use his Nigerian video films. And he's contributed to the special edition of African cinemas. So it's very well known as a scholar of the industry. Like two of our guests, he's also retired from Long Island University in Brooklyn. And he has taught at the American University in Cairo, at Tufts, Bennington, Fulbright Scholar in University of Nigeria, Nsukka, Ahmadu Bello University, University of Ibadan, University of Lagos, and is a life member of the Society of Nigerian Theatre Artists. And he received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Nigerian Film Corporation. Thank you for joining us, and you take over from me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here, and always a great pleasure to see TK. You know, it's my privilege to bring up the rear here, which means a whole lot of things I meant to say or touch on have already been said, and I don't want to repeat things too much. But you know, I want to continue what TK was just saying, which I found extremely compelling and has kind of been at the center of a lot that I value in him. I don't usually do this, but I want to quote myself. Last time I saw TK was at the 2019 IREP Film Festival in Lagos, at which he showed Yoruba Without Borders, the film that he did with Bola Bello. Anyway, I was sort of lamenting various continuing weaknesses that Nollywood, has, that the Nigerian film industry has, which are only becoming more apparent given the growth and the successes of that industry. And one of these is the really dire situation of the educational system in Nigeria from top to bottom. There's no university in Nigeria that has a robust film program, either in criticism and theory or in film production. People who pay attention to a lot of the arts in Nigeria, not just film, but also literature and fine arts and so on, are all complaining that there's no culture of criticism, which is really necessary for an art to develop. Chika Okeke was heard to say last year that a culture of criticism is as necessary to fine artists as affordable studio space. You just need that for an art to grow. So in terms of film and university education, there's no place where the liberal arts and film are integrated in an institutional way, in a kind of systematic way. And I feel that to be a real loss. I had a conversation with Mahmoud Ali Balogun that sort of focused a lot of these issues when he was saying, when Nollywood began and was staffed, the people who came over mostly from the NTA had university educations when educations were much better in Nigeria. So, you might have had directors like Chiko Ejiro, who did not have such an education, but he would have as an artistic director Fred Amata or somebody who did, and that's largely been lost. So anyway, now is when I'm quoting myself. I offer a concrete example of the virtues that one could hope a liberal education might bring to Nigerian filmmaking. Tunde Kelani has a profound sense of history in his life in the present and constantly displays an appreciation of all the arts. He shows his deep reading in his own literary tradition and in world literature. He exudes a broad ecumenical humanism, a capacious human sympathy, and an allergy to fanaticism, a devotion to public life and the common good, a rootedness in a particular heritage, and a complementary cosmopolitanism. He's an avid adapter of new technologies and entrepreneurial business strategies. He has a fertile, inventive, creative mind and utterly independent spirit. He's also a superb collaborator. He holds his values deeply, thinks about them, and propagates them. He deserves a dozen honorary doctorates, but my point is he never went to university. He apprenticed with a still photographer, was trained at the NTA, and then attended the London International Film School for 2 years. He gave himself a liberal education. We should never confuse schooling with education. Education's always there for those who want it. Okay, I'm done with my praise singing, but I wanted to share that. Nigeria's in an extraordinary state at this moment with the NSARS movement. And, when I follow that story through the media, I often feel like I'm in a Tunde Kelani movie where, uprisings against a corrupt elite by the young, and especially by young women, is maybe not in every single one of his films, but it's a recurrent motif. And Sharoide and Agogo Ewo, which in my mind are sort of at the center of his work, you know, both have spectacular scenes in which that happens. And this is the mark of a major artist, or in this case, let's say a great one, that, you know, as we look around at the world as it unfolds, we're reminded of their work. We're seeing it through their eyes. So anyway, one aspect of TK's work, which I think hasn't hardly ever gets talked about, is that he's been a BBC, he's worked for the BBC for years. I don't know if you're still credentialed as a as a journalist, as a videographer.
Well, this is unknown unless I tell people that I did a lot of newsreel work, you know, for the BBC World Service as their cameraman in Nigeria on contract basis, you know, and it sort of gave me this opportunity to be involved, to be in certain places through Nigeria, those times, the military era, and then up to, as a matter of fact, I was, whether I liked it or not, witnessed. I had to witness these things, and when I gave up and said, no, I'm not going to do this anymore, you know, and I felt that there was nothing in Nigeria that could excite me anymore, and particularly when Abiola was buried. And I was perhaps maybe the only person who slept on the pavement in Abiola's compound when his corpse, the coffin was brought in at 6 a.m. on the day that Abiola was buried. And, you know, for me, what I thought, what I dreamt, anytime I came into the Abiola compound, I used to think, anytime Abiola is released and he comes back home, how are we going to deal with this? Am I going to ask for a second camera? Am I going to do that? I planned it all in my head. And, you know, gradually the Abiola compound started to become some kind of graveyard. You know, suddenly Simbi is gone, you know, and then Kudrat followed. And then finally, Abiola was brought home, and I had to record this, you know. And I remember I came down, you know, because I climbed a wall. That day was I could never forget that day, because there was a lot of protests going on, and Showore was there that day. We slept in that place together because the police had thought that they would cordon off 3 kilometers to Abiola's house, but unknown to them, some of the students in Queen Showore had slipped into the compound, you know, and we slept there. And I got a tip from BBC. I was about to go to bed at 10 p.m. when they told me that I should, you know, just get out and get to Abiola's house, and so on. So I took the pillow, you know, and the bed sheet, and off I went with the camera and my assistant. And the following morning, Abiola's coffin came, and we did all that. And once I came back and gave them the tape and so on, I thought, well, no more. I just go back and start to do my narratives, you know, and so on. So at that time, it wasn't even safe to broadcast that, to tell anybody I was doing that, because sometimes it was dangerous. During Abacha heydays, you know, anytime we got to Abuja and so on, we gave the impression that we were staying 2 or 3 days, but we had a signal that 3 p.m. we should make for the airport, you know, and we came different, you know, routes to get to the airport, get together again and get out. And sometimes I have to look into my cabinet because I expected I'll be visited any time and so on. You know, people generally, I think I was left alone because they couldn't really place me. And because of the correspondent, I worked basically with 4 correspondents, and they were non-Nigerian. You know, they will be odd in certain places. So I'm briefed, and I go out along with the camera and bring the report. So it's, I've never put it in my sometimes I mention that I've been using for the BBC World Service. But those are exciting times. Sometimes, for instance, I mean, I could tell you this now that in Shawode, when the old man is on the steps singing that song, and he says that at the end, he says, because he's saying there will be repercussions and so on. What I followed with was this scramble, what something was going on. Actually, that was when Abiola was buried. I took some of that footage and put in the film, but it took too long for people to recognize that. So you are right. I mean, that was a part of my life. I done a lot of newsreel when I was in Western Nigeria. I was trained that way and then did a lot more in NTA before I left. We did a number of documentaries with John Chairman, and who is now Reuters chief bureau. I think he's still there. And we traveled. We were in Zimbabwe to see Mugabe come into office. We followed him to interview in Mozambique when he was in exile. We met Ian Smith. We met Joshua Nkomo. I was on the campaign trail with these people. We went into Ethiopia and we did the wall of the famine in Wolof. We followed all those things. So I didn't mention any of those things. I traveled extensively to do all these stories. And perhaps I use some of the experiences I came across. But, yes, you are right, John. Something I really never talk about.
The theme I want to talk about, from now on has to do with culture loss and culture preservation, which is, a theme which is absolutely central in everything you do. And we've talked about it a lot over the years, often with Tunde Kelani in the room, I'm happy to say. But I just wanted to check in with you sort of on that theme. And I've got sort of two ways I'd like to approach this. One is, I want to read a little something by somebody else this time, Emily Witt, who's a really good journalist who writes for the New Yorker and who published a couple of years ago a very slim book called Nollywood, The Making of a Film Empire. And she's, in the conclusion, she has a really, I think, memorable description of the state of the world's culture and Nollywood's place in it. So now I'm quoting her. Today, the monocultural human in almost any country in the world wears a t-shirt, jeans, and flip-flops, sits in a stackable white plastic bar chair under a low wattage fluorescent light, drinks a sweetened carbureted beverage, and sends a text message while watching the local franchise of The Voice or Big Brother. Humanity now has a common visual vernacular. She then quotes Achille Mbembe, whom a lot of us Akatas read, on how the project of defining an essentialist self, whether of a person or a culture, is kind of doomed. And what he now looks for in accounts of Africa is a response to the thickness of the African present, its stylization. This is a matter of disparate practices. And Witt says, Nollywood marks this phase of self-writing, where the assertion of Nigerian identity is not conducted in opposition to the forces of globalization and multiculturalism, but within them. Nollywood movies not only address the specifics of the Nigerian experience, they project an African identity outward into the globalized flow of popular culture. What I take to be your philosophy on this has, deep roots in modern Yoruba thinking. I always think of Owolowo in this context, where being modern and being Yoruba, holding on to the tradition, are absolutely not contradictory things. The objective is always to keep the tradition alive in the present and have it be a living, resilient thing. But the world Witt's describing has moved kind of beyond that, right? And I'm just wondering for what reaction you have to that account of things, where now what you can hope for is participation in global media, in a global cultural exchange with a local accent. Is that enough? Or how much is being lost in that formulation?
I think it's more than that. I think we have to fix our own priorities. And for me, I started to look at the examples of other cinemas. Recently I've been watching a lot of South Korean movies, and I think that they have perhaps taken advantage of this technology and moved on, and they have been able to lift the overall standards of their own intangible heritage, and they have projected, their own culture, and some of the movies are as good as any Hollywood movie. But again, they have preserved their own, and they have taken this to the world, and I think they are playing their part. And that's what I expect that Africa will do. I think that we will take advantage of natural our endowment, and if we go there, take the technology, grab it, steal it, whatever, and then come back and use it to start the development of our own, use it in our own. Not that we will take those things and then follow them again. And that's why I thought that there's a lot to do. I mean, it's not about, I think that that is my definition of globalization is totally different. And I think that I can tell our own story. I can tell our story and present it, and then start from local and go global. And I've always sometimes tell the young people that, look, it's important that you go global, but when you get there, the currency that you spend there is going to be your language and culture, and so on. So, but I don't know, for me, there's no two way about it. And I'm convinced that that's the only way to go, because there has to be a reason why we are all diverse. And I thought that if, like, Japanese cinema, Kurosawa, and all those people, Sajadi, India, that we've studied and all that, that's what they do. They use their language and culture to project themselves. And if Japanese cinema is valid, and Korean cinema is valid, and Polish cinema is valid, and Indian cinema is valid, and then there's validity in Yoruba cinema. So that's me. And I hope whoever cares, the door is open. See, that's the way I say. I think the thing is to be able to, assure the authenticity of what we're doing, and to make global standard and practice and so on. But our strength really is in telling us. So it will be, unfortunate if we ignored all those wonderful books, stories that all these people have written, and so on. And then, then start to, follow, like Fela would say, and so on. Where right now, sometimes, the Yoruba, they say, it's right here at the back. Stories are at your stories at our own backyard, and then we have the technology and everything to tell the story. So that's I think that is our own contribution to the world.
Well,
And I'm sure they are winning because they are all coming. They're coming to grab everything that we have and take the best of us and make, and contribute, to the discourse.
let me follow up on Jonathan's question because it's very important. And I will create a preface for my question. I've been privileged to bring so many speakers from Africa. Sometimes I pay for them, sometimes they pay for themselves. And at the end of every March, a minimum of 200 people will converge in Austin from all parts of the world. And this is something that I will keep doing. But one time I brought Akinwumi Shola here. It was difficult for me to get 6 people to attend. 6, I said 6. So when we brought Shoyinka, that was well attended because of the Nobel laureate and things like that. So, and I see I think at the weekend, you and I had a small conversation on phone, bordering on this question that Jonathan is asking you. Shola was disappointed. Of course, I will be disappointed. But he joked, he slept in my house that you've paid me my honorarium, that's fine. That's their business if they didn't want to listen. And his own argument regarding this is he wasn't persuaded about this globalization until Americans begin to speak Yoruba and speak Hausa and begin to eat our food, that this one-way traffic bothers him. This issue has not been solved. This issue of a one-sided traffic has not been solved. Whether it's in the book industry, the art industry, the movie industry, it still remains with us. And you remember the arguments that Buche Mecheta provoked, that she was not writing African literature, she was writing literature. And Chimanda brought that argument again, that I'm writing literature, not African literature. And people in African art, they said, I'm not an African artist, I'm an artist. Because they realize that once you put Africa in anything, whether it's a book, it's a movie, the number of your audience will then go down. Just as you have savvy people on the Nigerian end, we now produce a generation different from mine. They are also becoming savvy at the American end. People like Victor Ekpo in art, they're now saying, okay, we will market ourselves in a way in which, why not saying that we're not Africans? We'll begin to package what we do for a bigger audience. And new concepts, Afropolitanism, Afrocosmopolitanism, Afrofuturism, they are emerging, arising from this type of thinking and this kind of argument. And when the Black Panther, arguably the most successful in recent years, did their Wakanda series, combined, it was another Pan-Africanist project, but not the Dubois one, not the Senghorian one, not the Nkrumah one. They were able to have a greater appeal. So where am I going? How do we enlarge this market, enlarge this audience in a way that creative people like you benefit from a bigger, wider market? I'm not asking you to lose control of your storyline, because the storyline is important. But how can we package this storyline to make the kind of connections that people have made in signaling back to Africa?
Well, all I can answer is I'm willing to look at to compromise, this joke is sensible. I think it should be done, but I cannot cast Denzel Washington as the Alaafin of Oyo. So that, just sometimes it's just a question of things like, things like that, all those important things. So it depends on sort of, I agree that there will be compromises, there are certain compromises that I don't think can be done. And on the long run, sooner or later, I think it may backfire altogether. And it is not just more than the responsibility of a filmmaker. How about our own educational system? How about a system where history is no longer part of the syllabus, where literature, everything is played down? How about losing your language and culture and all that? And I think that we will be throwing away more if care is not taken. Because if we have gone the other way, perhaps we could have, developed our own in such a way that we can trade back and forth. But that we should, completely, the way I'm thinking is probably different. I'm looking at Yoruba in a global sense, Yoruba without borders. I'm thinking that if our films are well made and we do subtitling, catering for Yoruba in diaspora, not in the homeland, but in Cuba, in South America, and as part of the world, perhaps we can develop another market. I'm not talking generally about Nigerian film. I'm just looking at the possibility of a borderless Yoruba culture and civilization. And by extension, looking at recognizing that Yorubas are here just not in the homeland, but in all those places, perhaps we can develop another market altogether. So it all depends on so many factors. And I don't, like I said, I thought it's not just the responsibility of just the filmmaker. And I thought that if we had that kind of cultural policy, and if we extended, our diplomacy around the world, perhaps we could have been able to do better to market our assets.
Thank you. I have the same question that Toyin, you just asked. So, and I want to reframe it a little bit. Maybe to begin, Jonathan began by saying for an industry to grow, we have to have critique. So for a film industry to grow, for us to grow, we have to have access to critique. And I think what I'm thinking about is, we talked about the development of Nigerian cinema or Nollywood cinema. It's moved, Tunde, you keep referring to the global audience, the global reach, but you can't reach without a platform. And the platform imposes its own constraints. You can't get a film onto Netflix, which I think of as one of the world global platforms, without conforming to the expectations which are imposed by money. Netflix imposes those expectations, which in a sense will shape to some extent the film. When I see the major Nollywood films promoted by Netflix recently, I'm thinking of Up North or of Lionheart, after 1 minute, there is a sense of this is what Nollywood is doing today. It's very, the stories may vary, but in fact, the way the stories are presented, the way the language is being presented has smoothed out those dialectical differences that you might find on a less commercialized platform. And it's given a kind of evenness to the films. It's reduced the quality of the film. I think of a difference between the broad diversity of films and tastes you might get in a film festival as opposed to a major platform. I'm very glad, Tunde, when you refer to the South Korean films, where they've made breakthroughs in magnificent ways. And that's exactly my question, really, about how do we look at film, in this case, Nollywood film, still maintaining the individuality of independent production in the face of the large platforms that will necessarily impose a flattening out of what you could do as an independent figure.
Well, I think that beside that, there's going to be demand, not just by Netflix and the big players too. I think there are, God knows how many satellite stations and online platforms, that works can be targeted, But I'm very optimistic. I think we have to do it right, And once we are able to show that the possibilities, I'm sure these platforms will open up. I think sooner or later we're going to get there. I think I'm optimistic, and at the rate we are going, the industry itself is in a flux. Last year, things we didn't know with these possibilities were around the corner. We don't know what's around the corner, So let's wait and see, And if you follow the history or the trajectory of Nollywood, nobody's an expert, So I think it's just wait and see. I'm sure that perhaps by the end of the year or next year, we have additions. We have other types that we are beginning to discover the diversity of Nollywood itself. They haven't seen it all. I mean, this is just a tip. Others will come.
Well, I'll confirm that very briefly. I was the head of a committee for the African Studies Association this year, which awards an award for the best film from Africa and the best two runners-up. And we wound up looking at 30 different films for the final competition. And they came from all over the continent. They came from film industries that had been almost dead, almost not there, like Sudan or Ethiopia. And they were magnificent films. They were struggling like hell to stay alive and to do interesting work. But there's a lot, and I'm confirming what you said. There's a positive side here, not just the being submerged by the commercial, but actually independent, brilliant young filmmakers who found ways to get their films out from across the whole continent. So I do want to reinforce your point. Amazing stuff everywhere from Angola across the continent to Sudan, and wonderful films coming from there.
In the spirit of talking about the future, can we do more on what I would call fusion? Nollywood, Bollywood, in which a new generation like Sheung and World now say, can they not collapse multiple stories, multiple identities? I think I haven't seen it, but two groups are doing something combining Indian, Nigerian love stories. I saw the commercial, but I don't know whether it's been released. Will this be one way to solve this problem?
Well, I think this is going to be one of the ways. Like I said, I'm optimistic because I have a belief in all this. Everybody in Nigeria, in the industry, particularly the young people, the new generation that are coming on the scene, and that's why this film I'm going to make is very important to me, because it's going to be a mix of past. It's going to be more of the new generation than the old guys, and for me, that's truly another beginning. Who knows what will follow? So everything is possible, and that is the strength of the Nigerian cinema, its diversity. And
this question is for Jonathan.
Energy,
Okay, go ahead, because I thought you stopped, but your system.
No, yeah, it's okay. That's what I'm saying, that we have everything going for us. A lot of young people coming into the industry. We need train, and definitely we have the technology to make these great films. And Nigeria is. We give the world surprises very soon.
Okay, so Ken and Jonathan, I want to ask a question about copyright. It didn't used to be an issue like 40 years ago, 30 years ago, but now it has become a huge issue. I've had occasion to speak to marketers, and you see the problem even in Netflix. I spoke with Delta, and part of what they told me is around the issue of copyright. You do a Nollywood film, you put King Sunny Ade there without getting King Sunny Ade's permission. And some people will say, look, from the point of view of business, this is a violation, and they cannot play the movie. Then I have 7 series. I manage 7 publishing series, and it's always a problem. In poetry, 2 lines. In lyrics, 2 lines. Sometimes 4 lines after a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
In the past, you can just write on TK and Sunny Ade and cite them. No major publisher will let you do that now. Even for a PhD thesis, I get a good work, so many quotations, so many citations. I said, look, I can move forward with this because none of my series will touch it because you're citing them and citing them. I will tell you how difficult this is. Ken produced one student who was at Rutgers. He almost lost tenure. Why? It took him almost 2 years to get permission for a few lines from Shoinka. And Abiola, really. I'm telling you, I'm not exaggerating. Almost 2 years. So I'm now beginning just to say, how do young people with lots of energy, incredible talent, find writers? They don't have power, they don't have resources, they don't have money. This is not for TK now, this is for Jonathan and Ken. So how can they say, okay, I want to write a dissertation on movies, and the publisher said, we're not going to publish it because you have to go and collect permission. And I want people, the days of people like you it's now almost over, because you can't go to all these young people in Lagos and say, just give me permission. They will say, give me money.
Yeah. I have 1 or 2 things. Copyright permission for a still is not an issue because, I mean, technically, I don't want to go into it. You don't have to pay for stills. You have to pay for movie clips. But I want to give you, like, call this an anecdote. I told you we wound up with 30 finalists that we were studying to give the award for these films. Well, our committee had to see the films. How do you get hold of a film and have the committee view it? And we asked the filmmakers their permission to show it to the committee and give us a Vimeo so we could all study it. I was able to get hold of either the filmmakers or the distributors or producers of all the films, except for, guess what? The films held by Netflix. And Netflix, oh my God, they're hell on earth. I could not get an answer from, even though I got the email addresses of the people who were in control of the films that we wanted in our competition, they wouldn't answer. I couldn't even get them to answer no. Everyone else, eventually I could reach. But when you're getting to the level of an industry, so billion-dollar industry, they're not interested in little scholar garbage. To them, it's not, they had no interest, not even in the award that we were going to give to the winner. It was, they're in another world, the commercial world. So when it comes to publication, you're talking about perhaps scholarly publications. We're peanuts and we're nothing. We're not involved in real money. And so we don't exist on the same level of these great commercial platforms. I can't help but be resentful of their role in the industry. I share Tunde's statement. Good stuff will come out. Hollywood made great films as well as crap. And good films will come from Nollywood and they'll be exhibited on major platforms. But it would be naive not to see the power that they exert on the global level, and how that influences what people, creative artists as well.
Yeah. I mean, personally, I haven't run into the kinds of problems that Toyin is talking about. I guess I've been lucky. I've just pretended that these things didn't affect me, and so far they haven't. And I completely agree with Ken that the entrance of corporations and their logics and their interests into this situation is a serious matter with a lot of dimensions. And I've thought of it a bit in terms of the knowledge they hold about, who is watching what,
Right.
which is proprietary information, which they don't like to share with anybody, even within the same corporation, let alone with a scholar who just has, intellectual curiosity about it, or a person who's trying to gauge the, cultural situation of African film or of anything else. On the, another dimension of this is that one of the many very serious problems about preserving Nigerian film culture, the history, and disseminating it and teaching it and so on, is all the copyrights violations built into it. Even Amaka Igwe in the first generation of video film directors in Nigeria was about the most sophisticated person I knew about business and so on, a thoroughly kind of modern operator in lots of ways. But her films are, violated just as constantly on the soundtrack American music, for which obviously she didn't get permission. So you can't show that film. On the other hand, Nollywood, the Nigerian film industry has always had desperate problems with intellectual property. Nobody's intellectual property has been more systematically pillaged than TK's. How do you make a living from your art, no matter how good the art is, when you're in a situation like that with just no respect for intellectual property? So, there has to be some median, and there have been huge changes in the Nigerian film industry, or in sectors of it. It's now really divided into different sectors. I mean, those divisions are sharp, but but almost all of them have in common that they've recreated the conditions of the old Nollywood based on the sale of cassettes or discs, which is, yeah, there's plenty of work for a lot of people, but it's all really badly paid, and the budgets are so low and the schedules are so tight that people are, forced to just crank out works, at this furious pace. That's the shape of most of the corporate productions that we see these days. And the guilds seem to have pretty much collapsed as an effective force for negotiating with the corporations. They don't know how to do it. And, there's a lack of consciousness among most filmmakers that they need to negotiate for this stuff. And instead of just taking money up front, they need to be demanding residuals, a ownership stake, so that every time their film gets shown on Netflix or it gets shown on an airplane somewhere, they get at least a few naira, so that someday they'll be able to retire. Retirement is a blessed state.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all.
Baba yetu